let's turn our attention now to Major League Soccer before we dive into the 3 Canadian MLS teams, gentlemen. MLS has made the announcement of a playoff change. Okay, so let's follow the bouncing ball. So teams 1 through 7, they automatically qualify for the playoffs. Seeds 8 and 9 in each conference will go into a wild card match. So it's a 1-in-1 game play-in. And then once you're in round 1, this is where it changes up. Round 1 is now best of 3. So it's not the traditional 2-legged, who goes through on aggregate. It's not what they've been doing, which is the 1 and done. Now they're doing a best of 3, but it's just for round 1. The conference semifinals, finals will go back to 1 and done, and then the MLS Cup final will be a 1 and done as well. Wheels, what do you think?
Got
it. First up, I want to give MLS a little bit of credit because they're consistently willing to think outside the box to try to figure out another way or potentially a better way forward with a playoff format. Like for traditional, European club teams, like a playoff football doesn't exist. So they're working within a North American model that they're trying to make it work some way, somehow. And I think what this actually does, it provides more home dates. And I've continually said this about the Canadian Premier League, MLS. Never mind television contracts. I think that strong local markets that are what's going to define the success and or failures of leagues like this. And this is a way to bring playoff football to and more home games in doing so. Where it's a little bit confusing is just a confusion in it all, because it's very difficult for people to follow. I've said this before, whether it's, Leagues Cup, US Open Cup, regular season, an expanded playoff form, like it all gets a little bit jumbled, I think, in the messaging. So that needs to be a little bit more clear. And traditionally in North American sports, playoff structures, and the NBA's done this before, the NHL's done this before, they provide a smaller group of games for that first round playoff series, then expanded out to 7 games going forward. So it's kind of weird that first group of games is the best of 3. And then you go single elimination from there on, when those are the games that you want to see, right? With the better teams going head to head. And I know that Ollie's going to say this because I hear Oliver Platt's voice in my head. It's like, all of this kind of also devalues the regular season, which is the biggest challenge, not only for football in North America. The NBA is going through it with like load management. NHL is going through it. Baseball's, every North American league is going through it. How to make the regular season more important. And I'm not sure this provides a solution to that issue.
Yeah, worth also noting, right? The top seeds no longer get that bye, right? So they all, like I said, 1 through 7 all goes into a best of 3. You also have to imagine if you're the top team in the regular season, you maybe saw it as a punishment getting a bye because you lose gate revenue. Guys, Ollie, it's about revenue, right? So 3 games, now best of 3, the hope is that if all of them go to 3, because you make the money.
Yeah, I'm fine with the playoff format. Like 3-game series is a bit weird to me, but I'm willing to give it a chance. Jim Curtin said something interesting about how if you play the same team 3 times in a week, you hate them by the end of it. So that could, create some good rivalry and some good matches in that sense. So the playoff part of it isn't really the issue for me. They still retain a bit of single elimination, which is always exciting as well. I'm fine with that. But for me, it's like they're putting all their attention on what isn't really the issue. The issue is the regular season. Like that's the biggest challenge for MLS. It has been for years. And it's the reason why, for me, they still are a little bit kind of struggling to really make grounds on the top European leagues, because the quality of players in the league is good now. I think we all think the salary cap could be simplified and maybe they could be a bit more aggressive there to bring more quality in. But for me, the problem that continues to hold them back is that there's too many regular season games where you just don't really know what the stakes are. Like, we all will enjoy the first few weeks of the season and the novelty of it and football being back in North America. And then there's this middle part of the season where you're like, what does 3 points mean? What are you playing for here? And this change, if anything, kind of devalues that even more, because you now have 9 teams out of 14 in the Western Conference and 15 in the East who will qualify for the playoffs. So, but for me, that's kind of a bit of a step in the wrong direction in actually solving what the big issue is with MLS, what the big hurdle they need to overcome is, which is the regular season. But in terms of the playoff format itself, like I said, I'm fine with it, and I'm willing to give these 3-game series a shot.
Quickly, I just want to add, basically, you have to be average or a bit below average, and you're making playoffs.
Yeah.
I'll also say I don't really love that being first place. There's no real like reward for that with this setup. Like you're just,
Yeah.
I feel like the regular season should count for something. I think when you play hard and you work hard for whatever it is, I think 34 games, like it should amount to something. But I will say as a fan now, because that's what I am, no longer playing the game. I'm not thinking about travel or how many times we're playing. You get to watch more. You get a little extra game in a 3-game series. I think that's beautiful. I'd be curious to know about how players feel about the extra games and a bit of like, hey, just doing the bare minimum, you can make playoffs or make something happen towards the tail end of the season, where some teams are really tired, fatigued, or maybe hurt. What that means. So, but the gentlemen have covered that already as well.
But I also think it'll probably affect only certain teams because it depends on how the year plays out, right? Because the teams that are playing, first of all, in CONCACAF Champions League, so they already have a tournament that then goes on top of regular season. What if those exact same teams, I don't know, end up doing well in League's Cup and play beyond the group stage? So now they're playing those extra games. And now this is a team come playoff. Like, again, storylines in sport typically formulate after it's all said and done. We can't predict, right? Because at the end of the season, if that ends up happening to a team, we're like, oh, see, that team got overworked and they're punished for being a good team because they did well in every tournament they're in. They're exhausted, But if that doesn't end up happening, then we're like, this is the greatest thing ever, right? It fluctuates. It changes every single year. So let's see what happens. But you're right, Jordan, I'm with you on the top team, right? If you can't make the regular season count for something, and they tried to give the top seeds a bye, but the ownership of those top teams just saw it as punishment because they're like, well, what about our gate revenue? Like now we're not in round one and we lose, that kind of money. So they actually saw that as a punishment, getting a bye as opposed to a rest, a break. We'll see how it goes. Let's dive into these Canadian teams, right? I'm going to begin with Toronto FC. Let's begin with the Reds here. Ollie, how would you grade Toronto FC? So they've made some moves, and they've also made an off-season move that saw Jesus Jimenez, who actually started the goal scoring for them last year and then seemed to peter out as well once the Italians came on board. There was a trade there for Cervena. What do you make of this trade?
I like this trade. Jesus Jimenez is a good player, and I think will be a useful player, particularly the way FC Dallas play. But he's also an international player, and I don't know that it's that hard to find strikers of that caliber on the international market. You have the whole world to look at for that kind of level of talent. I think it's a lot more difficult to find kind of cost-controlled, young, versatile, domestic, kind of proven MLS players, and I think TFC get one of those who can cover them in midfield and probably start quite a few games in midfield in Brandon Savania. So I really like that deal, and I like the business they've done this offseason, to be honest with you. I think they have gone about it pretty methodically. They had a lot of needs they needed to fill, and they've done it. They have the MLS proven goalkeeper, one of the best goalkeepers in the league, in Sean Johnson. Same thing in Matt Hedges at centre-back. A couple of European players in Rosted and Petretta who look like they have decent pedigree and should be starters in their positions. Centre forward is probably where there's a bit of a question mark, especially now with Jimenez having departed. But I think overall they've had a good offseason. The question for me isn't so much about the quality of the signings and what they've done this winter. It's what they did last summer with Insigne and Bernardeschi. How good are those guys going to be? Because that's going to ultimately define how well this season goes for Toronto FC.
Don't jump ahead. We'll get to that. But Wheels, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this trade.
I'm not sure. For me, Toronto FC is the most difficult team to predict or prognosticate in all of Major League Soccer. And it's difficult just to evaluate this one trade in isolation versus the way that you look at the rest of the team. Clearly there's questions at number 9 for this team. And they've traded away a player who for the first 2 months of last season was like a record-setting striker for this team in terms of goals production in his first 10 games. Like it was off the charts. And now you're left with Diamande, who comes back into Major League Soccer. What to expect from him, I'm not quite sure. And Ayo Akinolu, coming off, a significant injury, simply didn't look himself last season. Now, if you strike gold with one of those two players, then you're fine, but you're kind of losing that ability to have strength in numbers. And when it comes to players in this team, they desperately need depth, guys. And Israeli is a depth player and potentially someone that can provide some cover in the middle of the park, an area where that spine of the team, if you watch them last Saturday night against the Galaxy, didn't look quick enough, looked kind of slow. It was plodding to a certain degree. I don't think that they're done. I still think that they need to make one more move. So we'll see if it pays off. It makes sense. You can justify it. Absolutely. But I think that any evaluation on this trade or any move that they made this offseason is incomplete until you figure out how the team, not these individuals play, but how the team comes together as one.
And you wonder if they make that move because they do have faith in Diamande. They do have faith maybe in giving Ayo more time, because I think we can all agree you also needed that midfield to get a little bit younger. I mean, between Michael Bradley and Jonathan Osorio, we know that the midfield needed help, and where you can't afford to trade away your depth is on the back line. But let's keep with the offense and let's still look ahead, because Jordan, what do you think a full season could look like here with Insigne and Bernadeschi? As we know, they came on late. It was too little too late for Toronto, especially after they announced that signing with Insigne. He didn't play yet. He couldn't play yet. They just went on this horrible run, and it just put them in the deepest of holes that they couldn't get out of. But now to start with the two Italians, who are the biggest signings since the bloody big deal of years ago, what do you think the full season's going to look like with them?
Tanti goal. That's what I think. That's what I.
Bravo.
Can you explain to the people that aren't Italian like you and I? And
I have no idea what you said.
I think everyone understood that. Just lots of
Mucho
goals.
golazo, lots of goals. That's what I expect. That's what we want.
Do not come here for your math lessons or your language lessons. We will not provide that on OneSoccer Today.
These are two guys that should drop 20 goals a piece. Like, I'm saying that right now. In the 34 games, 20 goals. They could. Like, they've had a season now, or half a season basically, to get acclimated in the league, get acclimated with players, the system. Cool. You have come here to bang in goals. We're not asking you to defend, ask you to bang in goals. Now, looking at TFC as a whole, I had my little scouts doing on Rosted and in Brøndby in Denmark. Hard-nosed defender, but that's still an area. Again, it's not just guys scoring goals. It's just how do you play as a full team. TFC, with the trade as well, you're getting a box-to-box with Savannah. So a 23-year-old, the young, he has a bit of legs. That makes sense, but it's just, what does this team look like as a whole? And like, quite frankly, I agree with Wheels that they just need more bodies. I'm expecting goals from your Italians, Andy, but I'm expecting this team who has the bare bones to do well, get more players, but also just be competitive this year, man, because Toronto needs it.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, the expectation, it's right. What did Insigne have? Like 6 goals in 11 games. Bernadeschi 8 in 13.
But both players came to Major League Soccer. Like, I think the goals last year that they brought maybe set a false pretense for this upcoming season. Like, both players over the course of their career, yeah, of course they can find the back of the net, but they're creative players, right? They're better providing the service than actually as natural born finishers. We said this when he came in. Like, Insigne is not Sebastian Giovinco. Like this, no. They're very, very different players. So I think that they're better within a team construct which plays to their strengths. Now, where does that secondary scoring come from? Jordan, if that's your belief that they're each going to score 20 goals. Like Henny Mukhtar last year, Henny Mukhtar scored 23 and he won the Golden Boot. TFC overall just scored 49 goals last season.
Do not.
These guys are both scoring 20. No, I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Obviously, go ahead. The expectation for me shouldn't be that these guys are going to be, Golden Boot winner or potential Golden Boot winners. The fact that they can contribute in so many different ways, that's where the strength of those players are for me.
No, fair enough. I think also too, I'm talking about goals, and yeah, I say 20, I give a number out, but I'm talking about an area. I don't really care about how many sweet passes they're making. I'm caring about assists, goals. Like, this is what they're brought in for. This is what they need to be doing. Like, you're looking at the rest of the team, and I'm wondering like where these goals are coming from. No offense, but this is just how I feel personally. So I'm thinking, saying 20 a piece for both of them is a lot, but can we get 30 between the both of you? Like, there needs to be product, because that's what you're brought in for. Whether it be assists from Bernadeschi because he has a sweet foot, sweet left foot, but they have to put something on paper. It can't just be we had a good performance, because I'm thinking where are the goals coming from for TFC?
Yeah. Expected goals can only go so far, right? That's the good old, like the analytics. Great analytical game. That's fantastic. Did you actually score? Let's move on to CF Montreal. They've lost.
Andy, can we just put a bow on them? Because their XG was only about 42.3 last season. Like, I actually think that scoring goals won't be a problem for this TFC side. I think that for them to be successful is going to be on the defensive side of things. You bring in a 32-year-old center back in Matt Hedges. You bring in another center back from Denmark. You bring in a new left back who looks a better player going forward than he is going back. Are you going to be able to keep Richie Larea come June, like when his loan expires? There's just so many questions about this TFC team. And when you look at where you might put them in, everyone likes to make their predictions, which is like an impossible task in Major League Soccer with the transfer window still open and what the summer window might provide. But just look at this TFC team. You can legitimately make the case for them to finish anywhere in the top 3 in the Eastern Conference, all the way down to potentially missing the playoffs, depending how things go. My biggest concern is the age, the depth. When there's international games like the Gold Cup this summer and Canadian players are brought in, what does that midfield look like? I just think there's so many questions to be asked about this TFC team. It can work out phenomenally well, or it can absolutely go pear-shaped.
But this is the thing, though, Wheels, and this is why I agree with Jordan. I think he's right. Like, they're not going to be a perfect team. I think this team is going to concede goals. With Insigne and Bernadeschi, you're getting a trade-off there. They're not going to defend. If you watch that Galaxy game, the preseason game last week, you could see it, right? Like, it's very easy to progress the ball to 30 yards from CFC's goal because there's no resistance high up the pitch because these guys just aren't going to do it. So in exchange for that, the trade-off you make is you need them to be brilliant. You need them to be 2 of the best players in the league. You need them to be putting up big numbers in terms of goals and assists, I think. And that's the bet they've made, right? Like, all the other stuff for me, like, they won't be defensively perfect. Yeah, the depth could be an issue, but it's all kind of side stuff for me compared to how good are these 2 players, because you do get a trade-off with them.
And whether you like it or not, when you're making that kind of money, in particular Insigne, when you are the highest paid, when you have broken the bank in MLS history, period. Like, I hate to say it, but that's what people want from you then is goals. They don't want that. That was a great little, off the ball, and look at where he is and positioning. And wasn't that a great pass that led to an expected goal? Dude, you're making 15 million. Nobody cares. You better find a way to score, or be part of
66 goals last season. Scoring. Just defensively. Is every game going to be 4-3, 5-4? Like, they're going to have to defend.
Maybe.
Yeah, it might, but
buckle up.
Though, yes. Defensively, it needs to be better. And everyone could say that. That's obvious. But if their games are winning 3-2, it's still 3 points. But that might be the way that she's playing.
Sean Johnson may not like that.
He might not.
No clean sheets for you, buddy.
No help.
Knock on wood. Obviously, that's what he hopes he gets. But okay, so let's turn our attention now to CF Montreal. Wheels. They've lost some big players, big name players, right? Mahavlich, Johnston, Kone, all moving on. So when you look at their offseason, what stands out to you? How do you grade it?
Well, not very good, to be honest with you, because you mentioned those players. They lose their best defender in Johnston, a rising star in Kone, their best attacking player in Mihailovic, and they most importantly lose their manager Wilfred Nancy, who did incredible things with CF Montreal last year. I think they've replaced them with a guy that can be an impressive manager. I do rate. I like bringing in Herrera to play in the defense. I think it's a savvy move by CF Montreal. But why hasn't more been done to address some of the players that have gone missing or that have left this team? It's not just those big 3 that I said. Like, Torres leaves, Miljevic is out through injury. Like, it's a real shame because I really think that this team was on to something, and they had an incredible year last year. And I think that we were one of the few people that kind of rated them from the start of the year and thought that something special was brewing. But now you take away so many key contributors in so many parts, and the ads, where are the DPs? Where are those difference makers that you're bringing to this team? Can a healthy Mason Toy make that much of a difference? I don't think you can give it any higher grade than a D or a C in terms of this offseason. They just lost too much. And we know that CF Montreal, they've been on the record saying that they don't make money like everyone else in Canadian football. Like, it doesn't make money, but you would have expected some of those players leaving for players to be brought in to help, kind of meet a certain standard where I think that supporters expect the team to be right now.
Jordan, I do want to come to you on this because there's a lot of distraction as well when it comes to Montreal. Kai Kamara, as we know, had said that he wants to stay in Montreal, but at the same time has requested a trade, doesn't feel like things are going to happen there. I mean, how much of a distraction is that as well? I mean, and we all know the last few years, the supporters very upset with the rebranding of the team without being consulted. We know they're not going to have this first team, like their kit is going to be ready in time because of something that happened behind the scenes where they didn't properly, communicate and consult with the Indigenous community of a script, of a saying that they wanted. And now you got Kai Kamara, who's a journeyman, but a great leader. Am I here? Am I not here? I mean, mentally, even as a player going into the season, just how you feeling about your club?
A bit fragmented. I think normally when you have I don't want to call it a rebuild, but you have a lot of players like Wheels mentioned that have left, and you have a new manager and you're having a new fresh look. You want things in place. And it doesn't seem that way for Montreal. And this was a team last year that was so exciting to watch. And you think that if you can keep the core, this year they can go on and do something. They can go further in the playoffs. So yeah, I think to start a season, you want things moving. Not having your jersey, hearing about Kamara, who a big name for the club and has put up numbers for years. It's just not what you would want. It's not an ideal situation. So I think for the average player, it does affect. It does wear on your mind a little bit. I know you want to get in and show. I know for guys like Sean Rea, you're chomping at the bit for your opportunity, leaving CPL to go to Montreal and play. But I don't think for him, he's thinking about that. But I think for the club as a whole, I think it's affecting a lot of the players for sure.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Ollie.
Oh, a bunch of Debbie Downers here. This is the team that actually made the playoffs last season.
I'm just saying, it's an off season where they just got plucked, man. They got plucked, and you got a distraction of a pretty big. Okay, so let me ask you this then, because not a lot of people are picking them to make the playoffs this year. I think one MLS pundit out of 13 actually has them in a playoff spot. Yeah, as usual. I mean, what was a couple years ago? They were dead last. They were ranked at the absolute bottom, then went on to have a great year. But do you think they're being disrespected again? Or based on everything we just talked about and presented to you, Ollie, there's a lot of questions still there with Montreal.
I think they are being disrespected a bit again, and I completely disagree, to be honest. I think this is going to be a good team this year. I think there was a perception that they went into this offseason and that they were going to get picked apart and everyone was going to leave and no one would be left. And it didn't really happen. Like Mihailovic, Kone, and Johnston are the key players that left. They are very good players, no question about it. They'll be missed.
Just those three, just the manager.
Just those and the manager, okay. Wanyama's still here. Everyone thought he would go. Kamal Miller's still here. Joel Waterman is still here. These are all players linked with moves. They brought in Herrera, who I think is about as good a Johnston replacement as you can find in MLS. I think he's a very good player, similarly versatile like Johnston is. They brought in George Campbell. Sam Piet's still there. The backbone of this team is intact. It's very, very strong, in my opinion, and gives them a great foundation. Now, further forward, that's going to be where the questions are. And I don't think they're done in terms of their transfer business. I don't think they can be in that sense. But I also think there's maybe room to adjust the approach a little bit, rely a little bit less on kind of the creative and crafty players like Mihailovic and Kone, a bit more on the strikers, maybe play two up front and one underneath. And that's kind of how Hernan Losada likes to play, I think, is very front foot, high pressing, more direct than Wilfred Nancy was. But this team, for me, when you talk about, again, the core, the backbone of the team being intact, being proven and strong from the first day of the season, I think this is the best team in Canada, as far as I can see. I do think they'll add more, like I said, and I think they'll be a playoff team again.
Hey, hope so, because here in Canada, when the three Canadian MLS teams do well, it's fun to watch. But I think there are definitely questions.
Best team in Canada. It's the one team that is bringing in a completely different manager. I don't know how you can say that. I think this team.
Let's talk about the manager. This guy took.
But wouldn't you acknowledge that Wilfred Nancy got every little bit he could out of this team last year? He did such a good job. So is the expectation that the new manager is going to be able to do the exact same thing with less talent in the team than the group had a season before? Like, look, if they go out and make 2 or 3 marquee signings, and yeah, maybe you can make the case. Maybe I can be completely convinced on everything that you've said. But based on where we are right now, just a couple days ahead of the start of the season, I think that you need to temper expectations.
I'm not sure you do. I think Losada is a good coach. Like, I know there was
Me too,
some controversy and he left DC under a bit of a clouds, but that was the only reasonable season that team has had in the last few years under him. They were one of the top scoring teams in MLS that season. He knows how to get goals out of what was a pretty limited group he had in DC. He's got a strong defensive core to build on. I think it's a good match. I honestly do. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but we'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
And last year we were all over CF Montreal for the record,
Yeah.
but I just don't think you can put lipstick on this. Like it's just a different team than it was last year.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm curious more than anything is, who's gonna be part of that attacking midfield, who's gonna help score goals, right? Like I think that's also gonna be
Kyoto.
All right, there you go.
Brilliant player. Love Kyoto. But
have they opened up their supporter section again? I know that was. Anyways, I'm going to keep focusing on off field because I think it's so unfair what's been happening to the supporters in Montreal.
It's always like that.
Ay. All right, let's turn our attention now to Vancouver. To absolutely nobody's surprise, Vanni Sartini ahead of the season is making the media rounds. I love it. He's such a personality. If you're going to get somebody to sell your team and get the fans hyped up, it would be your head coach. And they go in as the reigning Canadian champions, which means they're the ones right with a very busy season. So they're going to be, CONCACAF Champions League, MLS, Leagues Cup. We'll see how this team fares. They will be stretched pretty thin. We know they're going to go into the year without Lucas Cavallini, who made his return to Mexico. So when you look at their offseason, Jordan in particular, the acquisition of their DP, Sergio Cordova, was that impressive or underwhelming for you? How should we be feeling about the Whitecaps?
I'm curious to hear what the gentlemen have to say, but I'm going to say my bold statement and say that it was underwhelming. Researching and seeing stats as well, DP status, 3 years. He's 25, 6'2", 200 pounds. Cool, big frame. 11 goals in 34 appearances on loan with Real Salt Lake. And then my boy, Lucas Cavallini, he's not really my boy, but I just like that he had 9 goals, also 9 yellow cards this past season, in 24 appearances. Like, DPs for me have to come and change games. Like, that's what you're paying for. I don't know if Cordova's doing that. Again, it's all about systems and how guys are given the ball. Are you giving quality? Are the crosses? Like all these little factors, right? Like how's your team playing? What are you expected to do? What are your roles? But like in terms of DP status, Cordova, I'm just saying my initial reaction. Like I was shocked. I was a bit shocked that it was him. I was also shocked for the DP status, and I want to hear what Ollie and Wheels have to say about it because
Hey, you say yours with confidence. You don't need them to support.
I want to have a deeper conversation about it. I'm just like I was really shocked about it. Really, really shocked.
Someone take it.
Wheels, you want it?
Yeah, sure. I actually think it's worth the risk. I think that, and I'm not sure if it's that much of a risk at all. Although I think that Lucas Cavallini might be a better player overall. I just don't think he fit the style of play with the Whitecaps. And
you think Cordova does?
I think he's a little bit more athletic. I think he can move a little bit more. I think that he can be a solution. I think he's of a good age. I think that this is a type of player that the Whitecaps have actively gone after. And it's not just they had to bring in a number 9. Like they had to. It was a gaping hole in this team. And guess what? They potentially addressed their 2 other biggest concerns as well. At center back, bringing in Laborda. We'll see how good he actually is. Same thing goes for Cordova. If those players are 7 or 8 out of 10, I think you really have something there. And they brought in an established goalkeeper. And I think that was a position of weakness for Vancouver Whitecaps as well. Plus, a lot of the players that they brought in at the end of last season, I just don't think that they had that time to come together, to gel. I think the midfield is a much bigger strength. I really like what I see from a player like Blackman. This team needs to be better defensively. Last season, like it just wasn't good enough. I still have questions. That's my biggest question about this team. It's not the player in attack. It's how this team can improve defensively. Have they done enough to keep the ball to the net? Have they done enough so they can go on and control games in a much better way rather than just playing on the counter attack? I do like the pieces. I do also think the Western Conference is better than the Eastern Conference in Major League Soccer. So we'll see how all that plays out. But on paper, this Whitecaps team for me might be mid-table in the Western Conference, but certainly a team that should be expected to go on and make the MLS Cup playoffs.
I'm a little concerned about the Whitecaps, to be honest. And like Wheels kind of touched on it there. You're using a lot of words like could be and potentially and still some questions. And that's where I'm at.
That applies for a lot of teams in MLS, right?
Sure,
Ollie,
but
they go across the league.
I think Vancouver more than most. Like doing my prep for this show, like I just have a list of questions about Vancouver. Like defensively, are they going to be good enough? Like they brought in Laborda, who is a pretty young player. Is that really going to solve the issues they had last season? New goalkeeper as well. That should help. To be fair to them, really heavy schedule. Champions League early in the year, Leagues Cup in the mix this year. They want to be good in the Canadian Championship as well. 4 competitions isn't easy. Another new system tactically. Looks like they're bringing back the Christmas tree, which hasn't been seen too often recently in the way they're playing. Again, question marks there as to what that's going to look like. The big question for me with the Whitecaps, is there really a winning culture in that club? There hasn't been for years. Vanni Sartini, I know, is trying to change it, and I'm rooting for him, honestly, to do so. But I still have my doubts there. And then also just looking at the starting 11 overall, there's a lot of depth there, which is good for the number of competitions they're going to have to play in. How much top quality is there? Like Cubas, I really like as a defensive midfielder. Ryan Gold's excellent player. Other than that, how many players in that team are like among the best in their position in the league? There's a lot of kind of good 7 out of 10 players. How many of those really elite guys do they have? That's my other question. So it just worries me when I have a lot of questions about a team and a lot of things feel like they need to go right because they usually don't get 10 out of 10 right when you're asking those kind of questions.
I just hope, and I know that they went on to win the Canadian Championship last year, so we kind of silence things, but I feel like it's pretty traditional for Vancouver Whitecaps, in particular the head coach, that every time the Canadian Championship comes along, if they're not playing well, we always wonder, if you lose to a CPL side, is this where you see them go? That's usually been the conversation around Vancouver, so we'll see how their season goes.
If this team gets off to a slow start, unfortunately for him, because we all really like him, it's the manager. It's the manager of the 3 Canadian teams that starts the season on the biggest hot seat, because I do think that it's back with expectation. This team cannot struggle out of the gate. They need to be able to perform. What do they look like, and how do they take advantage? I really do think that they're a playoff team when you go through the Western Conference in terms of what they have. A full season of Julian Gressel, I think he's a really good player, and he can be a really effective player for this team. Gald, I really rate him. There's pace and attack. There's some really intriguing ingredients here. How it's all going to come together. I think Ollie's right. There are some questions, but I'm overall pretty optimistic about this team compared to a lot of other teams. This Major League Soccer season, there's less top-end talent than maybe any year I can remember. But I think the standard at the bottom has come up a little bit as well. So I think that those questions that Ollie asks, they apply for the vast majority of the teams across Major League Soccer. A lot of young players, a lot of unproven players, and Vancouver just add them to the list.
Well, let me throw something out of left field to you, only because you kind of made me think of it, right? It's like, I mean, there's a lot expected. And maybe that's just me talking to somebody in Canada of the Canadian MLS teams, in particular Toronto, because they were perennial contenders. Montreal had been looking good. They did make the playoffs last year. Vancouver has been turning things around. So which coach do you think is more in the hot seat here, Ollie? I mean, do you think CF Montreal, the new coach, gets a pass because he's simply that, a new coach? Do you think if things go sideways pretty early on, Vanni Sartini's the first to go? If you think Toronto has another abysmal year, I mean, is Bob Bradley as safe as we think he is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I agree with Wheels that, you know, if Vancouver starts badly again, and they did last season, Sartini's going to be in trouble, because it's time for this team. They've been building for a couple of years to get results. And if that doesn't happen, I think he's the one who comes under the most immediate pressure. But it's honestly difficult to predict. It's like I look at these Canadian teams. I have a feeling that one is going to be good, one is going to be okay, and one's going to be bad. And I don't know which one is going to be which, right? Like it could be anyone, could be any one of those teams. So it's tough to predict. But Vancouver is the one for me where I have the most kind of doubts about how that group looks.
How are you feeling about that, Wheels?
Yeah, I said it. Sartini, short-term contract. it's time to build off the platform that they provided. They're the squad, I think, with the most consistency, the least bit of turnover. They address some significant positions. So I think that the expectation should be that Vancouver picks up where they kind of left off with a better finish than they had at the start of the season. And I think that, I know they might not have the talent in the starting 11 of a Toronto FC, but I think that they can be a very difficult team to play against. As for Bob Bradley in Toronto, we'll see. We'll see. The way that things played out with Crescito was weird. He retired, and now he's
and then didn't retire.
And then didn't retire. What happened there? With all due respect to Sartini, like, the expectation is that they win in Vancouver. There's way more pressure on Bob Bradley than any one of these Canadian team managers. This Toronto FC team is going to be the highest spending team in Major League Soccer, and it's not even going to be particularly close. They've gone all in with experienced players. You don't bring a 36-year-old Victor Vasquez to the team and a bunch of other players that are over the age of 30 if this is going to be something that you're going to be patient with, that this is going to be a project that, maybe next year. No. They expect to win this year. What that means for Bob Bradley and his job security, it seems like there's kind of two heads that are kind of running the show with Toronto FC, in Bill Manning and Bob Bradley. If you take away one of them, what are you left with? So I think that he's in that position, but if things don't go well in Toronto, man, that pressure is going to be turned up, and it's going to be turned up rather quickly.
Again, you have the highest paid player in the league. You have another dynamite player in Bernadeschi. To your point, you're bringing in older players, which oftentimes when you're also older, you don't take being bust around or micromanage the same way that a young kid would. So manager really comes into play here. You have to manage personalities. You have to manage egos. I think there's
his son and his captain is part of that group. And Michael, God bless him, doesn't want to come off the field. Like, he's just a warrior, but does there need to be a little bit more give and take, understanding of what stage in his career he's at this year, and providing that delicate balance between being a coach and a dad and doing what's best for the team week in, week out when it comes to Toronto FC on the field? It's not an easy scenario for Bob Bradley to be in, quite frankly. So, but big splashy signings, a lot of money spent again. The expectation is that they're going to go on and compete, and we'll see if that is reality or whether it might be a little bit of a long reach here.
Jordan's staying quiet because he doesn't want to admit that he gave managers a hard time as he got older.
I actually didn't. I'm a manager's dream. Ask any of them. Manager's dream.
I'll take your word for it.
On-field leader.
Let's have a little bit of fun here as we wrap up the Major League Soccer conversation. And let's take a look at some favorite kits, a little 3v3 here. Ollie, top 3 MLS kits for 2023 for you.
I'm going to hope the graphic pops up quickly here so I can remember what I've chosen. There it is. All right.
Nice.
Number three, I had DC United's Cherry Blossom kit. You can't really see it like from a distance like this, but if you look at it up close, like the details are really nice. The pattern of the Cherry Blossom is excellent. So may not look really stand out on TV, but I think that would be a nice one to own. San Jose second. You need to see the full kit here with the black shorts and socks. I think as a complete kit, this is my favorite one in the league. Really like the colors. And then number one, just in terms of the jersey alone, look at that. Northern Lights for Minnesota United. That's the thing of beauty for me. So those were my top 3.
It's hard to argue. I mean, I'm not really a kit person. Every time we have kit jersey conversations, I'm like, they all look good. They're great.
It's a good year.
They all look good. All of them.
You know what bothers me
Let's be
most about
honest.
kits? You know what bothers me most about kits? The socks. If the socks don't look good, I know it's weird.
Matters.
To me,
It's
it's
not
the
weird.
socks.
I
If
get
they're
it.
just like a weird color, weird stripe, where it just completely throws me off. But kits, I typically kind of like the majority of them. Jordan?
Yeah. So I'm gonna break down my 3.
Ooh,
Charlotte FC,
different.
purple, color of royalty, with that nice little light blue on there. Come on.
Mustard.
I love it. It's very very tasteful. Now we want to go with Austin FC's green. I'm impartial to green. It's my favorite color. But you're gonna
Can see
turn off
that.
the lights in the stadium. Like you're wearing this. You're wearing this color.
Yeah,
I like it.
that Austin one. Yeah, it's
You
good.
like the Austin one. Now drum roll, please, for the sexiest jersey.
Yeah.
Sexy Okay, I can wear this to a barbecue.
Ooh.
I can
Yep.
pull up with short khaki shorts, white shoes, and wear this. This jersey is sexy by LA Galaxy. I like that they're going old school with the 96 back into the first season with the trimming, but it's nice. Also, too, I will say that my Jamaican roots, like it has a little bit of those color, little flair. If you can pull up somewhere and there's Wilson on the back, if I play for LA Galaxy, I'm living. If I'm a Californian, I'm wearing that shirt to the club. That is some sexy stuff.
I like color. I need to just give myself a little bit of a tan. I feel like that would work well after.
Let's go on vacation, Andy. Let's do it.
See, it's the pendulum for me. I either want black, sleek, make me look slim, or give me color. Give me color. Wheels, your final three is up.
Jordan and I are the most stylish people at OneSoccer, so that's number one. That Galaxy kit is absolute class. So that's my number one. There's nothing wrong with traditional, ladies and gentlemen. The Atlanta United 2017, 5 stripes. This is their identity. Spinning it back, that is a sharp-looking kit. And like Ollie put up the Minnesota kit, I love the colors. I love the like a little bit of a fade. What do they call that? It's ombre when it kind of fades up into another color. That is a class kit. But I will say, like Austin, San Jose, your selections were all in the mix for ones that I considered to be part of my top 3. So I think that overall Adidas did a really nice job on the kits this year. And finally, you can kind of distinguish one club from another. I think that's a really important step for the league, and I think they've done a nice job with it.
Yeah, like it. I do want to end on a feel-good story here because Canada will be going to another World Cup. Wheels, it will be the under-17. The boys qualifying for that. That has to bode well, again, when we look at the system in Canada soccer.
Well, some good news and much needed news for Canada soccer. They beat Puerto Rico, who, let's be honest, weren't that good. Canada showed composure, though, like winning these games and showing a professionalism in your approach, even when you're playing in on paper inferior nations. It's been something that's kind of lacked in our system for a long time. And the fact that the boys were able to step up the way they did. Special shout out to Stefanovic, Biello, Badwall. I think all 3 players were very good, not over the course of this game, but this tournament as well. Congratulations to Andrew Oliveri and company for this great achievement. And let's see if they can go on and beat the U.S. in the semifinal. I think they were a little bit overawed at times when they played in the group stage. It was a little bit of a free hitter. Then go on and try to play Mexico again, a team that you wanted to beat at the under 15 level a couple of years ago to win the CONCACAF championship at this point. This is a very important point to bring up as well. Teams like this have been underfunded based upon limited resources for quite some time. When we speak about building Canadian soccer, it's putting together that infrastructure that allows players like this to have regular camps, to come together with top coaching, and providing an opportunity to go achieve something like this. That's been an area that needs to improve when we talk about our Canadian soccer ecosystem. So a special shout out to the academies that provided the bulk of these players. TFC, Montreal, Vancouver have all contributed to this infrastructure, and well done to the guys. And it's going to be an invaluable learning experience playing in another under-17 World Cup later on this year in Peru. I cannot wait to watch this team along the way.
Agreed.
Yeah, that kicks off in November, December is when that World Cup will happen. Jordo?
Yeah, agreed with you, Wheels. And you got to harness that talent, right? And make sure these guys are going in, and when this ladies turns out, the ladies as well are going in, and they feel valued. They're also getting that attention to detail, because when you're looking at nations and the success of a World Cup at the men's and women's level, it's all about underneath, right? It's how you're building up your system. It's how you're able to get to World Cups and play these important games, right? And this is how you build it. So it's hugely important. I think personally, in 2011, when the U17 boys lost to the U.S. in the finals, 3-0, this is revenge. I hope that any boy watching this is revenge, getting to the semifinals, winning tomorrow, and getting back to the finals. Yeah, get back to the finals, but beat the U.S. because the U.S. and Mexico, like being around there, it's in every stage that we want to be competing with these top nations. So good luck to the boys.
Yeah, just to add to what the guys have said, like I think it's felt like far too often in the past, men's and women's youth teams have walked into these tournaments blinds and with very little preparation because of the lack of kind of opportunity to come together in camps. this team was able to play a small tournament, but a tournament nevertheless in Mexico in December. They then also had a friendly immediately before this CONCACAF championship as well. And you can tell the difference, right? They look like a team that is much more cohesive, has much more of an understanding of playing together rather than a group that's come from all different clubs and just been thrown together at the last minute. So they've been excellent. Congratulations to them on the achievement. And hopefully now they can continue on against the US. Just wanted to say as well, some individuals have really impressed me. Some promising players in this team. Biello's really running things in midfield. He's been key for them. And Chimeria Meze, the centre back from TFC, I've been super impressed with as well. I think he looks like a real prospect in defence. So some really good individual performances in a cohesive group overall.
It's funny because some of these players have the opportunity to kind of step up into the program in the coming years. I feel like they don't have that Alphonso Davies or Jonathan David. Like, right, there's a lot of players that are like 7, 7.5, 8 out of 10. And that's good. That's a good thing. That's how you build up your bulk of talent and allow some of these players potentially to take that next step. So you might not have that off the page superstar, but there's strength in numbers. And that hasn't always been the case with our national youth teams.
But then again, Wheels, it's also about, like, I agree with you, but peaking at the right time, right? Like U17, like for me, you could be good, but honing those skills the next 3-4 years, you're playing, guess what? For 2026, you're playing for the men's side at a World Cup. Like that's what it's about. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. And it was great to see. I mean, last year we also saw the Canadian women under 17 qualify for the World Cup, unfortunately not making it out of the group stage, but qualified, getting that experience. Now we're seeing the men doing the exact same thing as we continue to keep an eye on the youth and coming through the program of Canada Soccer and keep this program tops and keep it on the map the way the women have for years at the national level. And of course, the men are now starting to do so with the top talent that they have. That's Gareth. That's Jordan. That's Ollie. I'm Andi Petrillo. Thanks to Jess Lisi for joining us earlier to talk about the women in the She Believes Cup. You've been watching OneSoccer Today here on OneSoccer, and we'll see you next time.